Hey friends, my name is Eric, and I'm going to show you how I made this simple little textured bowl just as an experiment in turning. So off the jump, I know it's been a minute since I've talked to you guys. I've been busy, and I just enjoyed making silent videos for a time. That's just how these things go. But if you haven't noticed, different backdrop behind me. I did move. I bought a house, which is exciting, and I will share that with you soon. All the things that I'm going to do to this place, because there's a lot to do, and it's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be furniture builds. There's going to be a small shop in the basement. There's going to be built-ins and decorations and things of that nature. So we will get to that. But for the moment, we're going to focus on this here little bowl. And the thing that I really wanted to touch base on about this bowl is just the fact that it's an experiment, and experiments are okay. Play is a good thing when you're designing, when you're woodworking, when you're working in any kind of visual artistic medium. It's important to play and explore and just see what comes out sometimes, and that's exactly what this bowl was. So I want to walk you through how I did that and hopefully encourage you to do some of those same things. So let's go to it. All right, so right off the jump, you can see that this piece started off as clearly a giant hunk of maple that was just kind of no real flat side or anything like this. This idea actually started off as a spoon in my mind that I was going to make a separate handle for and then turn the bowl, and naturally just kind of evolved into the piece that it ended up being. But when I started processing this piece, I had this hunk of maple and I thought there's not too much I can do with this given the size and the shape of it. So I wanted to try to turn a bowl from it. So that's where I started off with the bandsaw and trying to figure out how I was going to put a tenon on this piece to turn without spending too much time or wasting too much material. I just used an MDF circle and hot glued it to the back of the piece of maple. Now, I don't know, I will admit that I'm not a professional turner. So I don't know that this is the most stable way to chuck something up. But I do know that it works. I've seen turner friends of mine do it in the past, and of course I did it with this. I don't know that I would use this technique with a huge chunk, but with something this small, it's perfectly appropriate. So then I go about just marking the circle itself and try to waste away as much material as possible on the bandsaw to try to lessen any wobble that I have on the lathe once I start turning. And then of course, it's just starting to rough things in. You can see what I'm doing right here. You may be able to hear it. I'm just playing with the speeds, again, to check the glue seam on that MDF tenon there to make sure that everything is going to stay together once I start turning, and then take a couple of light passes at the beginning to make sure that nothing's going to explode. I know you can't see it in this, but I am wearing a face shield, and anytime I do any kind of bowl turning, I make sure to wear a face shield. And part of the reason is when you turn a bowl, there's always a chance of catching a crack or a chip that you didn't know was there that's hidden within the wood, and the piece could frankly explode. So it's just something to be aware of. You'll actually see me do that in just a sec. But what's happening right now is I'm just looking to make sure that I get past any flats and that I turn a complete cylinder. And now you'll see right here, get a little chunk, got a little bite there. There was a crack or a chip in that piece of wood that I was unaware was there. And so it just caught the gouge just a little bit. Luckily, it was just a little bit of a split that I can go turn past. But had that been really deep and had this been a large piece, there definitely would have been a chance that that explodes. So that's why you want to make sure you're wearing a face shield when you're doing any type of bowl turning. Now once I've turned this piece to a full cylinder, I can go ahead and start forming the inside of the bowl. Now whenever you turn a bowl, you're always going to want to turn the concave section of the bowl from the outside to the center to ensure that you're going along the grain and you're not turning against the grain. So that's just something to be mindful of. You also want to make sure that your tools are sharp. I know when you're starting out, it's really easy to forget to sharpen your tools or not want to sharpen your tools because you think it takes too long. I was guilty of that same thing when I was starting out as well. Just sharpen your tools because you're going to get a better result and you're going to work more safely if your tools are sharp. Now, in order to turn the outside of the bowl, what I attempted to do was to create a jam chuck, which is just simply a piece of wood that's pressure fit on the concave section of the bowl in order to allow me to turn the entirety of the outside of the bowl. But what ended up happening was I just couldn't get enough pressure on either side of the bowl in order to keep it moving every time I tried to take a cut. You can see the piece stopping. So ultimately, I had to figure out what next to do and just bypass the jam chuck altogether and chuck the bowl up in the expansion jaws. The unfortunate thing about that is you can see how much meat of the bowl itself is inside the chuck. So I wasn't going to be able to turn that, and I didn't like that. So what I ended up doing was padding out the bowl itself with a couple of MDF discs and then using the tailstock to put even pressure on the front of the bowl so that when I locked down the chuck, I ended up getting only, I want to say about 1/4 of an inch into the chuck. And that was enough, this bowl being so small as it was, that was enough that I was comfortable turning with just that little bit of grip on the bowl. Then I started turning the outside of the bowl and just seeing where the shape would take me. I ended up kind of at this acorn shape-ish, which was kind of interesting to me. I kind of liked how it came to a point. And again, just playing around and seeing what was going to catch my eye. The thing ultimately that wasn't going to work was that this bowl wasn't going to stand because it had a round bottom, obviously. Even though I liked the shape, it wasn't going to function as a bowl. So ultimately I ended up taking it to the belt sander and just sanding a little flat on there in order to give me an off-center feel to the bowl. And then it's time to add the texture. And what I did was I took this flame bit from Sabertooth in my rotary flex tool and I just started carving lines. There's kind of this Reese cup feel to it a little bit. It kind of just reminded me of some of these other textured bowls that I had seen, and I just kind of did whatever came out of my hand at the moment. And I really dug what ended up coming out. It's a little bit odd, it's a little bit interesting. It's not overwhelming, it doesn't overpower anything visually. And I think it complements the kind of wild figure of the grain itself. And then after just a little bit of sanding, I went ahead and put some finish on it. This is a bowl. It will, have spices and things. It's like a little tiny mix bowl. So I ended up just using a little bit of oil, mineral oil on the interior to seal the piece up. So there you go, friends. I don't know that you can get any simpler than that. That really is just an exploration in form and texture and seeing how they combine and play together. And it was just seeing whatever came out of my hand at the time. And I think that's so, so important. As an artist myself and as a teacher of woodworking and visual arts, it's so important to allow yourself space to play and just explore and see what happens and go have fun. Take time out of commissions, take time out of doing the things that your wife or your husband or your mother or your children want you to make, and just make the thing that you want to make and have fun with it. So that's my soapbox for the day. I'm going to get off that now and get back to figuring out how to move things around in my new house so that I can get you guys interesting content about how to build interesting things for a space and design spaces and design furniture in spaces. So with that, friends, I'm going to bid you farewell and adieu. I hope that you get into the shop and make something today, tonight, this weekend. And until I see you next, be good, make good decisions.